So what do you think is going to fly better? This, or this? Welcome back to Striking FPV R&D. My name's Ashton, and as you can see, I've managed to print out a couple sets of props. Of course, the main attraction here is going to be the tri-loop, 3.5 inch size in this case, but I've also just quickly thrown together this standard style blade. It's got roughly the same dimensions, the same pitch and everything. And the reason why I've done this is because, according to Fusion 360, the weight is about the same, the surface area is roughly the same. So if there's going to be any kind of fair comparison, whatever that means, it's going to be between these two. But I do have some concerns. This guy was a little bit more difficult to print and a lot more floppy at the edges, whereas this, one of the things that I mentioned in the last video was the viability of toroidals as printable props because the shape actually gives them greater rigidity further out. Whereas this, same dimensions, roughly same thickness, same pitch, but I can definitely feel more flex in this. And that might be down to material. I might have to thicken this up, but then it becomes heavier. There's so many factors, and I'm not here to say that this is the definitive, but it's the more interesting test, I think, because the quality of this print, roughly the same. So in terms of their actual performance, neither of them are as smooth as this. And so comparing this standard injection molded design to a tri-loop 3D printed, not quite fair. So I thought, what, if I do this, I won't even have to do as much post-processing to get a fairer playing field, so to speak. Now, one thing I will mention when it came to printing these out, you'll notice that this one I haven't trimmed it off yet, but they're these tiny little mouse ears. These are printed in PETG, and PETG, I've discovered, when you're printing large objects, it doesn't matter so much, but actually when you print very thin objects, PETG doesn't really like to be stretched around much, so these blades kept pulling off the bed until I added these tiny little mouse ears, so that was a crucial thing regarding this. Now, I fully expect one or both of these to explode, but we won't really know until we get out there and test it. So let's get into the garden and see which one's quieter, which one draws the least amps. And there's just one thing I want to clarify with these tests. This is done with a HGLRC Veyron 35 CR. This is what I actually used to fly around my garden when I was doing the head tracking stuff. The one crucial issue with this test setup right now is I'm not using the most optimal motors. Normally I fly with Xing 2203.5 motors. They're the same motors that come off the iFlight ProTech 35. I burnt two of them out when I was up in Maehongsson, and so I had to revert to 1408 motors that I used to use back when all this hardware was mounted in a 3-inch frame. My old Reptile Cloud 149 HD. So these motors are already kind of being taxed. Luckily they're not carrying a full-size GoPro, it's just the Hero 8 in this case. But I'm expecting these motors to get pretty toasty, and maybe by the end of this test, if the toroidals really do pull that much more amperage, these motors might start to get brown. I've got new ones on the way, so I don't mind too much if these do kick the bucket, but that's just the only kind of weird thing I should mention before we get to doing this. yeah. I'll say this much. I needed significantly more throttle to get this to hover. The sound was interesting. It wasn't as low pitch as I thought it might be, maybe because I didn't smooth these. But it was definitely had an interesting whine to it. The other aspect is this. These are in prop guards, so I have no idea if the prop guard being there makes a significant difference compared to, say, a drone without prop guards, so maybe that's something I'd have to test with the Roma F6 at some point, with 6-inch tri-loops. But anyway, interesting. But it flew and it didn't explode. Now that's cool. So what have we learned? Well, we've learned that my thoughts directly after the flight were way too jumbled, and such I took 15 takes to try and do a wrap-up to the video, and I couldn't, which is why I'm here, now at night, re-recording this a couple days later after having edited a lot of the footage. So, what have we actually learned from the testing? Well, I've worked out that maybe there is more testing to be done. The prop smoothing looks very, very relevant. In fact, when I made my community post regarding the 3D printed designs, one of the commenters, Guilty Spark, nice Halo reference, mentioned that he had 3D printed a Gemfan tri-blade design and found that it was like 40% less efficient compared to the injection molded real deal. 40% is a huge number, and that makes me wonder. So just to refresh you on the test results, the Nazgul Cines drew about 8-ish amps, the Gemfan D90 drew about 8 amps, the Toroidal 3D printed tri-loop took 12 amps, and the Hex Blade, sort of Gemfan imitation, drew 16 amps. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm just a dude testing at home, in his free time. But I'm going to make the potentially incorrect but quite hopeful but definitely questionable assumption that actually toroidal props may in fact be more efficient. Purely because the toroidal 3D printed prop beats the standard style 3D printed prop by a huge margin. And the standard style was basically built to imitate the same specs as the toroidal. That is, it was the same pitch, had the same rough surface area, had the same weight, same prop diameter. Everything about it was the same, aside from the fact that one was toroidal and one was not, and the toroidal somehow performed better. That's bizarre. But of course, realistically, my results are very, very not conclusive. Now, were I to try different combinations of blade pitch, thickness, blade count, different materials, smoothing methods, etc., and still get the same results, then that would be more meaningful. But for now, it's just speculation. So where do we go from here? Well, personally, I'm going to be taking a break from this toroidal stuff because at this point, I've already done 3 videos discussing the design principles, pros and cons and stuff. I produced a bunch of designs which you can download from Thingiverse and Printables.com. And of course, the latest video was the Fusion 360 tutorial on how to design your own toroidal props. This is actually quite a lot I've done, I think. Now, realistically, the people who can take this further are the ones with resin printers, maybe SLS, laser sintering printers, and more importantly, those who are actual aeronautical engineers or have some degree of professionalism in that direction, which I don't. And I think at this point I can kind of pass the proverbial torch to them. That's not to say that I'm going to stop doing this. I do think in the future I am going to, play around and print out some other designs and just do a lot more casual testing. Certainly not dedicating as much time as I have to it for the past 3-4 weeks now. So yeah, I will continue to dabble and do some little tests on my own. And if anything interesting does pop up that's worthy of a video, I'll definitely make one. But for now, I've got a lot of other odd little projects and ideas that I'd like to explore, so hope you guys might stick around for that for a while. So anyway, if you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up, maybe share it with your friends. If you've got any comments or questions, suggestions, stuff like that, comment section down below, and even though I'm going to step back from the topic a bit, I will still do my best to read and reply to anything that I see down there. And if you have enjoyed this content and you'd like to see what other weird stuff I might get up to in the future, then please consider subscribing. And of course, you can directly support me by buying me a coffee. Links to that, as well as everything else, down in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Now here's a weird idea. If you want to see me make more toroidal prop designs, maybe you guys should try to get MIT to hire me.